Nora Montañez, and it is an honor to welcome you to this panel discussion tonight. First, it is a privilege to represent the newly, formally, ALMA, the Alliance of Latinx Minnesota Artists. And give it up! Thank you. And before I say anything, I just want to give thanks and my heartfelt gratitude to Mixed Blood for offering their space to have this conversation and housing us today, and to our panelists. And I want to give each and every one of them just a huge gratitude and a big hug, because they are theatrically in our community. And on a day-to-day basis, they are here and they have been generous enough to present here, to be present here, and willing to engage in this dialogue. Panelists' discussions could be a little complicated, and necessarily so. And there's so much to say and not enough time. And the concepts that we are discussing are bigger than any of us in this room. Still, it is Alma's hope that tonight it is vibrant, enriching, inclusive, and positive. And we hope that the only discomfort that happens tonight is the discomfort of pushing against preconceptions and allowing ourselves to rethink our assumptions. And with that, Ricardo.
Yes, thank you everybody for being here. My name is Ricardo Vasquez. I am a member of ALMA, and I've been working with Nora over the past couple months in helping to produce this panel and helping to get all of our resources together to get the Alliance up and running to the resource database that it is now, which is huge because we haven't had an alliance like this before, specifically for Latinx artists, and we're hoping that it'll be a great resource, not only for our own community, but for other outside organizations to use as a place to connect, to look at, and to find talent and upcoming productions from our own community. The idea for this panel came from an article that was written by Rohan Preston on April 7th, 2017, and the response that was given from ALMA in a statement that was released on Facebook and is now subsequently on the ALMA website. The big thing that we're talking about tonight is the intentions that we have and the impact that it has on the community. And that's something that we're going to go back and forth between organizations' intentions and then the impact that it is received by a community. And just to bring people up to speed on that particular article, I'll just give you a rundown of some of the highlights that were in that article that ALMA based a response statement around. Again, this was in Star Tribune, written by Rohan Preston. And it begins with, it's a classic catch-22. A theater wants to stage a musical that demands cultural authenticity, but can't find the cast to do it. If it doesn't do the show, however, it's missing an opportunity to cultivate the talent pool. It teamed up with community partners such as Teatro Pueblo on St. Paul's own historic West Side. The "it" is in reference to the Ordway, offering free workshops to help performers develop their chops in musical theater. Quote, "There are not a whole lot of Latino musical theater artists in town, but if you don't do a show like this, then Latino performers don't get a chance to build their skills," end quote, said artistic director James Rocco of the Ordway. Quote, "The whole reason we're doing any of this is to share this great musical art form of musical theater with our community. I want West Side Story to be a magnet for people who want to make great art, for them to see that we embrace our great community and to be drawn to that," end quote. The article goes on to say, "There is a wealth of musical theater talent among African Americans in the Twin Cities, and to a lesser degree Asian Americans, but Latinos, not so much." Al Justiniano, founder and artistic director of Teatro Pueblo, said, in quote, "In partnering with the Ordway, we hope to develop a strong pool of talent, not just for this show and upcoming shows, but for the larger field." Rocco is looking towards September when the Ordway will stage In the Heights, the breakout musical by Hamilton creator Lin-Manuel Miranda that's set in a Dominican neighborhood in New York City. The company hopes to have even more homegrown Latino performers in that show. Al Justiniano goes on to say, quote, "We do things like how to present, how to prepare pieces for auditions. Some of the stuff is basic, but that's what you do to build the infrastructure and talent pool so that companies don't have any excuse about hiring Latino artists. It's a win-win because it's also about showing how a culturally specific organization can work in an equitable, respectable way with a mainstream white-led organization." In response to this, ALMA released a statement that I'll just, in brief, again, just hit some highlights of that statement back. ALMA states that this article to stage West Side Story, Ordway Center decided to grow Latino talent, implies that our local Latinx artist community is lacking the necessary ability to appear on the Ordway stage in a musical. More than 1 year ago, our local Latinx community was promised a strong commitment by James Rocco and the Ordway to partner with Teatro del Pueblo to ensure our representation on stage. The only catch was that we would need to be trained through weeks of workshops, classes, and seminars in order to be ready for the first round of standard auditions. We were told by Teatro del Pueblo that the Ordway was accustomed to a certain standard of excellence. We were told our local Latinx community needed to prove its own value for the wonderful opportunity to play gang members in a 60-year-old musical written by 2 white men that ends with one of our people shooting the romantic lead and being placed in handcuffs. We are, as ALMA, professional artists. We are not in need of charity, workshops, or instructions on the fundamentals, but rather regular and consistent opportunities. It is a fact that our presence on stage is not as visible in as other major theater towns, though not due to lack of talent or unwillingness, but because opportunities to play roles are infrequent and inconsistent. We will not tolerate organizations who feel that they have the right to label an entire community as unworthy to be represented on stage. While we are pleased that the Ordway is helping new actors learn how to become professionals, we are not at all new to this. Just because the Ordway and Teatro, for very different reasons, do not see or have not seen some of our work, it does not mean that we are all amateurs and in need of fundamental skill development. No one organization, such as Teatro del Pueblo, represents the Latinx community, nor should any individual ever feel the right to speak on behalf of an entire community at large. If the Ordway is truly trying to reach our communities, it is time to listen to us about how these issues can be addressed and eliminated. We look forward to the opportunity to develop real partnerships, exhibit our talents, and bring authenticity to the stage, and help institutions like the Ordway be proud to showcase local talent in order to combat the larger issues of systemic exclusion. So a goal of this discussion is to see how our community, our theaters, and our systems play roles in our community and how theaters can intersect in a profitable and valuable way.
And this discussion is entitled Artists of Today, Intersecting Systems of Yesterday. Within our current Twin Cities arts community, there are artists wrestling with institutionalized methods of community development in an attempt to dismantle previous exclusionary practices. While welcoming new artists to the room where it happens, how do we respectfully work in this, we respect in the working conditions that we are? How do we intersect, develop language, and establish theater that both represents and celebrates our community of artists? Our panelists are going to introduce themselves in a moment, but first, it is my honor to welcome tonight's moderator, our very good friend, Kwan, the man of many talents, that will lead us through tonight's discussion. Kwan.
Congratulations, everybody. Thank you all for being here on a Monday evening. Again, my name is Kwan, and I'm a local artist within the Twin Cities, as well as my day job being over at Pillsbury House Theater, creating dialogues and performances around undoing racism and diversity and inclusion. So I was really pleased to be asked to be part of this conversation because I feel like there's such importance around giving space to these things, to start bridging that communication and creating that dialogue to push to understanding, really, and also to give space for all the parties so that there's at least some understanding about what we're talking about and what's important, and also be able to identify the outside pressures that are informing decisions on a personal level, on an artistic level, on a systems level, on an institutional level. So. I really feel like my job tonight is to just be able to pass the microphone around and have as many voices populate and as part of this discussion. And I really hope that this is a robust discussion, right? So I know that you are all out there and there's a table and chairs and light up here, but I really want to include your voices as part of this. and your input. So if you have something to say, put your hand up, okay? Great. Think of yourselves up here on the stage as well. So great. With that, I might just invite the panelists to maybe just take the stage, and then sort of do a round of introductions, and then we'll start in on this. Yeah? Just so you know, I'm just gonna name it. This table is up here so that people can write notes. Okay? It's very much utilitarian. So great. So why don't we actually just start maybe down at that end? And if you could introduce yourself, and perhaps if you're here representing an institution or what that might be, and then we'll just go down the line. Okay?
Sure. I'm Michelle Hensley. I'm the artistic director of 10,000 Things Theater Company.
My name is Raul Ramos. I've been a resident artist here at Mixed Blood for 25 years.
Hector Chavarria, I'm a performance artist known as the Big Gay Mexican. Tell your friends.
I'm Jamie Grant, and I work at the Ordway.
I'm Belisa Torres. I'm a performer and director and a professor of theater at Oxford University.
I'm H. Adam Harris, and I'm the Associate Director of Programming at Penumbra Theater Company.
Great. So I wanted to just sort of open up this evening to give space and breath to why we're all gathered here. So what I'd like to do is, perhaps Jamie, you might be able to speak to this, is speak to the intent. So if we're going to talk about intent and impact, maybe talk about the intent from the Ordway perspective of why this production.
Well, to be fair to everybody, hi. I arrived on March 14th, 2016. On March 15th, 2016, we announced the new season. So my impact on the season was limited. But I want to be clear with everybody that when I heard what the plans were for West Side and In the Heights and how we had gotten to that point, I was really excited and proud of the relationship with Al and Teatro del Pueblo. The reason we reached out to Teatro at the very beginning, from my point of view, was the best part of the story. And quite frankly, the partnership is much broader than was defined in that article of April. And part of the reason the story about the broader partnership wasn't released is my fault. Because I sort of felt like it was bragging, and unnecessarily bragging about a partnership that should be part of what we do every day. So let me go back to the story. The Ordway reached out to Al when they were looking at the concept of doing West Side Story. The last time West Side Story was done at the Ordway was in 1980-something, I don't remember the year. And there were protests in the community. There were protests because there were white artists playing the parts of characters of color. And so the Ordway reached out, not to just somebody in the community, to the major protester in the community at that time, and said, we're looking at the opportunity of doing this work. We think it's important work to be done. We think there is an interesting story still to be told. And not that we wanted permission or blessing, but we wanted to get a sense of what were the requirements to be able to do a production of West Side Story in 2017. And that started a dialogue with Teatro that ultimately became a partnership that we loosely at the Ordway called In the West Side Heights, which was a partnership between the two organizations to not present, but to produce, as we call them, the Ordway Original, these two productions working in tandem. And as I said, that's part of a bigger story that never really got told. The article was about a small part of the process. Did I answer your question?
Yes. So speaking to, can we sort of dive into why West Side Story? Why that play? What spoke to the organization about that?
Well, I think it was coming up to a historical anniversary for Bernstein, who many regard as one of the fine composers for musical theater. And I think it was a production that we long felt was due. To be very clear, and I've discovered in my career I don't get to write the articles, even if I offer to. They never let me write them. We would not have selected either of those work if there weren't enough local artists to do that work. So I think that that is part of a perception that is mistaken. So I think there was a feeling that West Side Story, it was time for that work to be done. And it's been around for 60 years because it's a spectacular work and a thought-provoking work. And we felt it still talked to audiences today. And having seen our production of it, I think that's true.
Michelle, I see you sitting on a
Well,
a
yeah,
question.
I want to, and I know you didn't choose decision, but I want to just dig in a little bit more. I mean, maybe that's it. Maybe the reason is just it was time to do it. It's a landmark. You know, it's a play that's always been done. But like when I choose a play, I really think about the story, and I imagine the audience. And our audiences are incredibly diverse. We have people from all different income levels and ethnic groups. But I actually try to imagine what that story specifically, what in that story might really interest or engage all of our different audiences. And so I'm wondering, again, I know you didn't actually choose the play, but can you be a little more specific about that story and what it has to say to us today and what it might have to say to the different people that you regard as your audience? I would just like to
Well, I think,
flesh it
and in
out a bit.
fairness, I'm not the artistic
I know,
director like you
but
are,
maybe-
and I did get to see your production of Fiddler recently, and it was pretty special. I think the biggest shock for me when I moved to Minnesota was issues in relationship to our education system. I moved from Austin, Texas, which is not really Texas, but did you move from Austin? So it's not really Texas, but it is sort of Texas. And Texas is number 49 out of 50 states in education. 49. And the local high school spent $62.5 million on a football stadium, but didn't have textbooks. It was just a different way of going. And I was moving to Minnesota, number 2 in education, except if you're a person of color.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're 45, 46, 47, we're way down the list. Gang issues and gang violence in our schools is still a huge issue in the Twin Cities. And it would seem to me, again, this is not from the artistic director's point of view, there were lots of stories to tell. West Side Story is the first musical the Ordway had ever done that had a school audience for it. We did an 11 a.m. matinee. Actors love 11 a.m. matinees, let me tell you. But it was one of the most moving and thought-provoking experiences because we talked to kids about things that were important truly to them. And that 60-year-old work still talks to those kids. So I do believe that it is important. And the unique thing about the Ordway Originals for us is the first week audiences are our subscribers. The ushers don't have to work at all. Everybody knows where their seats are. But the second week is everybody new. It's those new to files, we call them, those people who've never been in the building before. And West Side Story attracted a whole bunch of people who had never set foot in the Ordway before. And that's worth something really important to us too.
Can I just,
Yeah, go ahead.
so the thing is, like, so for me, West Side Story actually means a lot because it was actually the first musical I ever saw on stage. It was the high school did it, and it was an all Mexican production of West Side Story, which works, by the way. Anyway. So for me, like, it means so much. And like growing up, for some reason, every time there was a movie night in high school and in middle school, they always showed us West Side Story. So it was basically institutionalized in my brain, like growing up. So coming from a point where like finally realizing like, well, not only what is not Latina broke my heart, you know, actually realizing a play where the Latino man kills the white man at the end, and it's I don't know how to explain it, because to me I still love it, but it's like, what are we really trying to say with this musical?
To me, it's the power of narrative and the power of who's deciding, who's telling the story. And I think, you know, I can't remember the year and I'll mangle it, but I mean, it's Langston Hughes' notes on a commercial theater. You know, you've taken my blues and gone. You put me in swing Mikados, you sing it on Broadway. You put it in everything but what it doesn't, until it doesn't sound like me. And so you've got that sort of thing where you've got this narrative of the writers and the authors and the narrative of the story, and then it becomes, and when they do it good. It's got the right rhythms and it's got the thing, you're listening, you can do all the things, and so for a second you think that's you. You're like, oh yeah, I want it to be me, but then it's that delicate part of, I mean, it goes back to intent, not just the intent of the organization, but the intent of the author, and then that intent is also then rooted in that organization or that person's narrative, how they've experienced the world, because that's what we then reinforce when we have that sort of thing. Like, what story are we telling? Like, let's tell this story of that time, where 60 years ago, if it is of great value, that I find it questionable, you know, that's the narrative that is of such great value 60 years ago. And then I think we have to challenge ourselves of what makes it so valuable now, other than the fact that it's something that we hold on to, that it's something that feels good. And we were talking, and you were talking about the history, and I'm wondering, like, the perspective of, like, the perspectives of writings by people who live in that world. I don't know.
Well, I will start with the fact that this is not a story about a white gang and a Latino gang. It's a story about an Italian gang and a Puerto Rican gang, both non-white at the time that the story is portrayed, and even arguably in New York, New Jersey area still today. So I think that's the first thing, that it's a story, not only that it was written also by a white man, but it was written about two non-white ethnic groups in a very specific place in New York. Not even all New York. If you want to know when someone is not from New York City, they will tell you they're a New Yorker. Because the real New Yorkers tell you, I'm from the Bronx, I'm from Brooklyn, I'm from the Heights, or from El Barrio. So for starters, there's something about the story that read differently than it reads today, just that fact. Also, as a Puerto Rican, I have, I think yours is love and hate, mine is hate and love relationship with the play. For Puerto Ricans, it was one of the few times where they were in Broadway represented. So for some of them, it was actually, especially those in the island, it was really exciting. Just because we're named, hey, that's me, right? Even if we don't say ole, like in the movie at least, some of the characters say, even if they were, however they were, from costumes to speech and actors, where misrepresentation, there was an excitement also at seeing yourself on stage, because when you don't see yourself, you don't exist, right? So there was an excitement, but also, what are you representing of who we are? So this complexity and this politics of the play have been a long conversation. So that's why sometimes it's frustrating that it's still happening, right? Because you would think, well, my question is why West Side Story, that I think is the question you want to ask. I do love it. I like to live in America. I even put it in one of my solo performances, but
I feel pretty all the time.
Yes. So that's why it's also very exciting to see that then there's going to be In the Heights, and I will even add some things to the mix. the story is about Dominicans and Lin-Manuel is Puerto Rican, you know? And when J-Lo was selected to play Selena, that the Mexican American, the Chicano community was angry because it's like, why not? So even remember that even within what we like to call the Latino community, the African American and or Black community, the Asian community, there's actually nationalities, ethnic groups, languages that are put under an umbrella for simplification, for solidarity, for many political and reasons that sometimes we adopt and sometimes are imposed on us. So it is a more complex conversation just than what we want to address. So I won't go too deep on that because then I can give you a 1 semester course. but I wanted to have it, you know, here in the air as that it's more complex than just the casting, right? And my question, and it's not for you because I don't think it's just the Orway. Guthrie is going to do West Side Story too, right? And it's done in high schools, by sometimes by all white cast. So for me, the question is why we want to tell stories about people that are not told by those people. So not only the actors, but also the playwrights, also the directors, you know. So sometimes there have been like other play, South Pacific, you know, that have been very, very controversial, The King and I, that arguably, if we don't think of the politics of them, if you have the capacity, and I do, of just enjoying the beauty, the music, the dance, you know, that's what musicals do. They leave you most of the time uplifted. But we have our politics too, and we say, ooh, that's messed up, right? But not everybody's seeing that, and maybe that is the problem or at least for me, you know, not everybody is in my class and can deconstruct what is messed up or how this play was read then, how it's read now, what are the implications of it for a community, and especially when the audience also is not the people who are represented
Right,
on stage.
exactly.
And that if that is all the knowledge that you're getting on the messages, you know, and we can say the same for TV and film and so forth, of what you know about people that are different than you.
Right, especially because for me, like doing a production of West Side Story where you're telling a story of people that live, that you know, are in a specific demographic where that demographic can't even afford to see themselves on stage. Because, I mean, I looked at Ordway tickets and it was more expensive than Wicked. And I was kind of like, wow. So I didn't go see it, even though
I just want to sort of revisit this point, and both Lisa and Michelle sort of pointed this out, but I mean, you said something that sparked in my mind around the danger of like single narrative, right? And if that is the only story, if West Side Story is the only story that represents Latinx, you know, the community, then and as an institution, what is that message? And as you say, you know, you were inviting new audiences. You talked about, you know, gangs in schools, but I mean, what is the message that you felt like was that really carried that production beyond, you know, artistic merit?
Well, I think, again, I go back to, this is part of a twofer, a plan that we would do both in the West Side Heights, and I think the commitment was to do both over a 2-year period, and I think that's part of the story and part of the narrative, if you like, that's an important part of the conversation. Elisa is right. I mean, it's the story about immigrants. It's the story about immigrants, and that's an important story to tell. I am an immigrant to America. My parents are immigrants to Canada. So I'm first generation, and although I am white, there are certain issues and things that are different as a result of immigration. My father's accent, people used to say, "Can you get somebody on the phone who can speak English, and he's been speaking English for 85 years. But, so there are lots of issues related to that. I still stand behind the commitment to do West Side Story. I think it's an important story to tell. It's a spectacular musical with a lot of interesting mores in it that I think still are important in America today. And that's the reason that we did it. And that's the reason we're going to do In the Heights as well. And I think it will tell a different story. And Bookend did. They tell two very interesting stories.
Do you work with dramaturgs for your
Yeah.
plays?
Yeah, I think part of the process, one of the things, again, I know we don't brag in Minnesota, but one of the things that I think the Ordway does really well is we have a large number of community advisory groups. And it's not just community advisory groups on paper, it's people who actually sit down and discuss all of the activities that should surround the work and why it's important. And this involvement in the community, I think, allows us to make smarter decisions and to be more impactful. When I lived in Austin, Texas, when I first got there, we redid the website, and I wanted to do the website in English and Spanish. It cost $15,000 to do the translation. It was, in relative terms, nothing. But once a year, the board member at the budget meeting would always ask me why I'm spending $15,000 on translation. What I discovered was when the board finally made a decision that we wanted a board that actually accurately reflected the community in terms of demographics, and the board reflected the community, no one asked me that question ever again of why do we spend $15,000 on translation, because they understood it. And the best part of this story is not that we did it. A friend of mine who was with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce told me about his mom who was learning to speak English. And she used to go to our website and toggle back and forth between, now that wasn't the intent of it, but what a better reason for the community theater to do it in both languages than for someone to use it for something that it wasn't originally intended. I think it's important that we provide opportunities for everybody to see the work. And the Ordway Originals provide opportunities for artists and provide opportunities for audience that I think are really important.
Did you have some?
Yeah, Jamie, I just had a question that I think Kurt was talking about earlier about the workshops. You stated very confidently that you would not have done West Side Story if you did not believe that you did not have the local talent in order to do that. So then my question is, where did the initiatives come to partner with the ACRO to have workshops for the local community? Or where did the idea come to have special workshops or classes for the community that, as you said, was there?
Well, Ricardo, as I told you before, I think the whole idea surrounding class, it was never thought of when I was an actor 1,000 years ago, when those shoes were in style the first time. Class was not something that was ever thought of as bad. It was something that was great. And the fact that we were doing class, it wasn't just for artists of color, it was for any artist who wanted to participate in the process. And we did a number of classes. And I would love to tell you the support, the funding support that we received to do the classes was zero. We did it because we thought it was important for the community. We thought it was an opportunity not to train anybody, because there were several actors who never did any classes who got jobs in West Side Story. We thought it was an opportunity to provide access to some very difficult choreography. Because part of the goal of this thing was we were going back to some of the original work in terms of choreography. And that it was a good thing for the Ordway to do for the community. And look, when I read that article, I understand why it's offensive. It is offensive. I don't dispute the things in the article. I wasn't involved in the interview at all. But our intent of doing West Side Story and In the Heights was to provide audiences with interesting, thought-provoking stories, and to do a great Ordway original work. An Ordway original work that doesn't include anybody from the Twin Cities isn't an Ordway original. And that's the reason that our producing work, from my point of view, is really important.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There are hands floating out there. Sorry. I'm going to start on that side of the room, and we'll just make our way over here. I see your hand, okay? So go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, how many local Latinx artists were involved in West Side Story? And then also, what is the commitment then for In the Heights?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Good question. See if I have the exact number. There was, I don't have the exact numbers with me, but there was a significant number of artists who were local in that production from here on both the Jets and the Sharks. The expectation is we've been doing lots of auditions in the Twin Cities for In the Heights. We would expect to have a large number of local artists in the Heights as well.
So, sorry to.
No, that's all right.
A large number. Can you give us a ballpark, something percentage-wise?
Well,
And specifically from the Latinx community, I know a lot of folks were involved in that show, but I question, I guess, that assertion.
I'm not sure which assertion you question.
That there were a bunch on both sides of the chart. I'd love to know a number or a percentage, and then also,
there were 6 from out of town. The rest were from the cities.
Latinx?
Yeah, all of the, I believe, I don't ask people what their backgrounds are, and I can't legally, but I thought all of the people, what I heard from the cast was that it was the largest group of Latinx performers they had ever done West Side Story with, and that I found out as we went on that it was predominantly a Latinx cast and stars.
I think they just told me who you are. Would you mind introducing yourself? Sorry.
I'm Jake Drop.
Okay, great. I didn't know.
Director for a few more months.
Great. Was there a hand next to you? Yes. Yeah.
When you were speaking about that y'all thought the classes would be good for the community, sorry, which community were you referring to?
The acting community.
Oh.
Right in the back.
Yeah, Michelle, I was thinking about what you were saying in the story. The story, the reason, as a former adjunct professor of Shakespeare, one of the reasons students involved in high school English teaching, one of the reasons that they bring students, and teachers like their students to go see West Side Stories is Romeo and Juliet. It just, it always reminds me of what Oregon Shakespeare Festival is doing with assigning different groups the task of rewriting Shakespeare for contemporary times. It's contemporary at the time it was written. But, so, the white man who wrote it was Shakespeare. the original white man who wrote the story, the narrative.
He didn't come with the first story of Romeo and Juliet. Actually, there are other stories, some of it
yes.
from Spain. So he
Yes.
didn't even come up with that one.
That's what's so interesting about these discussions is the kind of, every story is particular. Every appropriation story is particular. West Side Story, the historian Elizabeth Solomon, and you can actually find the West Side Story blog by that follows the law and the development. It was originally, the original idea was, and
non-white groups. Both groups were non-white also at the time.
The other reason is that, what was the other reason? Somebody said, there was a quote that, well, it's not fresh enough for something, it's not contemporary enough, it's a little bit behind the times, so they were writing it. That conflict between Jews and Poles. So, the person who suggested, who was it? Was it Harold, was there a Harold involved?
Alfred.
Yeah, okay, oh, that's his name.
Harold.
Alex Churchill. Anyway, he suggested, I believe, the idea of, because it was so much in the news, the conflicts between Puerto Rican gangs and white or Italian gangs.
Italian.
Yeah, Italian. And so they changed it, but the migration of these plays is so, it's just, I just think it's really interesting to consider. It's still appropriation. I mean, I agree with that. But it found its way there, to that moment where they decided we can't do this show for reasons that, I think are relevant to the discussion.
I think it's interesting, and you pointing out the history of that and me being Puerto Rican, I can listen to you talk about the history of how the show came to be, and it still has the same impact on me when I see the musical at the end of it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's we look at Romeo and Juliet and the lens is Verona, and we're looking at that. So if you're from Verona, you would have a different experience in talking about the street gangs in that time. And with being Puerto Rican and looking at the street gangs and looking at the way that the story is consistently told, I just think that it's important that there have been gangs for 60 years, and the ending of West Side Story has not changed the fact that there is still gang violence today. So if the notion that West Side Story helps reduce gang violence or it speaks to that, I find that to be ridiculous. I just say it doesn't matter the history, it's the impact for me.
Oh, the impact that it would, but whoever said that it would reduce gang violence.
It just gets brought up.
We're gonna go here and then,
I got to see the production. I mostly see dance. I was supporting local dancers that were in the production. And to be able to afford it as a grad student, I used rush tickets and was sat in the very last row of the orchestra. And at intermission, had I had the lung capacity to boo, I would have. If I felt like I could have carried to the stage, I would have made a scene. Because I was horrified at the discrimination and the stereotypes. And I know that today we're privileging a talk about race, but the transphobic, the homophobic, the sexist, the fat shaming, it was endless. The amount of discrimination in this production, and those were choices somebody made. When I had seen the production as a film, the Puerto Rican women, are talking to their boyfriends, and they're excited to be in America because it gives them more rights. On stage, they chose to have a simple fat girl talk about how wonderful it is back home, and that reading changes everything. That casting changes everything. It's incredibly exciting to hear that this is being put in front of children, and the transphobia and the homophobia is not checked at all. I scoured the program for rationale. Here's what, I'll read a highlight. Talking about the play being shelved for 5 years. A clipping titled, "Six Jailed in Fight Death" explained that during a street fight in 1955 between young local California gangs, 20-year-old gang leader Robert Garcia was killed. Suddenly, with this news story, the path to
I think I think we're sort of turning that corner into impact. But before we get there, I mean, we do want to recognize that this is live theater, that these things aren't just in vacuums, right? And when we invite community or audience, that it's and we try to drill down and be specific without naming, then again, we're seeking clarity around that. Again, who are we trying to impact? Who is this story for? Whose story is it? Who gets to tell it, right? All that. So I just want to sort of turn the corner, and we're sort of there is around impact, right? What was the impact of one either being invited to the production, whether it be workshops or be part of the cast, having been a part of the broader community as artists, and seeing this go up? I mean, what is the impact?
I just kind of want to point out the impact I got was, I was like slightly offended when I got the email about the workshops, because it was basically saying I needed to improve on my skills, and then when the article came out saying that we don't exist, I was a little like, yikes. So I just kind of want to point that out, like there is an impact on how companies attempt at casting. In the people of color communities, like, because I was hurt, and hence the reason that I didn't audition for the show.
And what you're mentioning is important to know that the way we cast is also historical. It hasn't been the way casting, where people go, show up, do a little piece. That is not only historical, sometimes it's specific to a culture and a place. How people are cast, for example, I was trained in Peru, in Ecuador, in Puerto Rico, and you could audition in the schools I went to. That is not true for everything, but you could audition to any character you wanted to perform, regardless of gender, race, age. And again, I'm not going to say that's the main, but just to contextualize that these things are, specific to culture, to times, to countries, etc. Also, how for many, many centuries, usually there were troops of actors. So usually you were within your company doing the same type, or, even when it wasn't age appropriate anymore, maybe you were still the damsel in distress and you were already in distress. And there is, there are companies, there are practices where it all starts with a workshop. That's how I start my audition special, because I'm training students. I know for sure that everybody, and I would say arguably that need to, need more skills. So it's not that I'm at all against for workshop, but my question when I saw it was like, given the tradition of the audition, why didn't it start from the audition? And then if there were people, because that's what I've done too, if there is that person and I really like that person, but their voice is still not where it has to be, let's then have that person trained. If I have this other or change the square. I mean, in Three Penny Opera, if you see Helena, the original actress singing this song, she's almost talking, and I'd auditioned to it, and it was like this high, and I was prepared to sing like this, and it's just, so also, and you have seen musicals where, especially for males, they're talking, they're not even singing, they're just talking, because the producers or the directors want that actor, so you adjust to help that actor get to where they have to get. So I was curious about, that this is problematic because it starts with the assumptions and you don't have that skill in the pool. And I would say that with actors, that's also difficult because a lot of us are not full-time actors. So you may have never seen us because we're performing in that tiny theater, in this cabaret, we're performing in other cities. We may have at other point of our lives had a career as actors, and maybe now we're educators or accountants or, or working at Starbucks. So there might be a pool there that Teatro Pueblo is not even aware of. Also, we have people moving to this city because it's one of the greatest theater cities, and we have artists moving here all the time.
It's true.
So, yeah, that was what I was curious. And again, like I said, yes, I'm curious about the Orway, but I wanted the question to be even bigger, you know, not just the Orway. Orway as an example of something that is happening across the country, not even only in Minneapolis. This thing with Indy Heights, I think 2 years ago, there was an issue where the main character was a white actor that misrepresented himself during auditions because, of course, people didn't ask. And he was the one who hinted that he was a Latino, and he got the main part, so.
He was Italian.
Not Latino.
No.
Yeah.
And that's a great, you know, you bring up this great point around what I imagine, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but what is a successful partnership? Yeah, and how does that work between organizations and within communities? But I just want to shelve that just for a second so we can just focus on the intent or the impact again, process that, and then come back to these sort of larger questions.
Yeah. Well, just changing the theme, one of the things that struck me as in that article was the point, and I'm sure I'm going to misquote it, but he was saying that the Orway, they did not produce this Latino themed projects, and we didn't get a chance to be on that stage. I found that really extremely offensive because why can't I audition for Jesus Christ Superstar? Why don't the Latino people here can audition for Annie? You know, so the opportunities are not there for us, but it's not because the subject matter, because I know that you know I see a lot of faces, and I work with a lot of you, you know, from Wendy to Michelle to Mixed Blood and whatnot, that they're a lot more inclusive, you know, and here especially in the Twin Cities, that's happening, and there's a lot of inclusion. I like to see more of that because I've been an actor here for about 25 some years. I don't think that I've played a non-Latino character in this town. And that's shocking to me. When I look at my resume as like Latino, I have not played anybody but Latino. And I will do it.
May I respond?
Sure.
To that? And again, my margin here, I've been here a relatively short period of time. But one of the issues that we discuss and debate all the time is this very issue. And I would make the case to you that when I go back and look at the casts that we've had on the Ordway stage and the Ordway originals, there's been lots of, I'm not sure what the right word is, there's been lots of blind casting. I'm not sure that's the right word, but there's been lots of casting. The first production that I saw at the Ordway, I was doing my interviews, and I saw South Pacific, and not South Pacific, I saw Sound of Music, not South Pacific, Sound of Music. And one of the captain's children is an Asian girl. And we've had a discussion about that back at the office. Gordon and I debate that one all the time, of whether that's appropriate casting or not. And I think it was blind. And I think if you look at the work that James and the team has done, I think there are lots of examples of blind casting at the Ordway. And we deserve to take a lot of heat for a lot of things. I wasn't here during Miss Saigon, but I hear about Miss Saigon every single week. And I own it. I get paid by the Ordway, that's part of the deal. But I think there's much more casting that goes against the comment you've made in our plays than are recognized. Thanks for letting me respond.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, I mean, do you feel like there's a difference between color-blind casting or non-traditional casting?
We have lots of discussions about this.
Yeah.
I think it's important, well, I don't think it's important for people to understand, but diversity, equity, and inclusion is sort of one of the top 3 things on my plate every single day. It's what my job is. And part of the reason I reached out to Ricardo and Nora on the first day I could was because I thought it was important that we be part of the dialogue. So I can tell you that there's not a total agreement on that issue all the time. I have come from the school that I think casting can be totally blind. And if you look at a picture of my family, it is. And, but not everybody agrees with that. We have lots of discussions and debates about that. James is one of those people that does cast blind all the time.
I don't think I'm just blind, but I think you're just the best person for the role.
Right. So I take back my word.
Yeah, I just want to recognize that there are hands up, so I did see your hand before. Yeah, I just want to give a quick moment to Michelle, and then
Yeah.
I'll go right to you.
I do think it's really important not to use the term colorblind because at 10,000 Things, and I think this is a much more common word, and I think most theaters would use the word color conscious casting. So you can't just cast the best actor, no matter what their color, in a part. It takes a lot of consideration of the history that particular actor's ethnicity has faced, their history of oppression, or that gender. And then, the way I like to think about it is it's opening up possibilities. So in other words, there's actually great joy in casting someone from a group that has constantly played the subservient role in a powerful role, and making sure that throughout the production, the way you cast it, that balancing and releasing of possibilities by casting people as they've never had a chance to be cast before, the joy and the energy of that is released, and what happens when you do that is that translates to your audience, who has the chance to see themselves or see others in roles that has never happened before. So I would actually, I think there's a lot of thought that has to go into it. It isn't blind at all, and I do feel like there needs to be a lot more of it in the Twin Cities. I think particularly by those institutions that have been largely white and run by white men, there still is not enough imagination put into that. I will also say in terms of gender as well, there are often all kinds of ways to cast women in roles that they're not traditionally thought of, that releases energy and releases possibility and releases joy. So I would just encourage you to, as you have those conversations at the Guthrie, push it way farther. You can go a lot farther. And there's so much joy in that. You know, there's kind of this old adage that casting is 90% of directing. But when I look on many Twin Cities stages, and not all, but a lot, that's not where 90% of the imagination goes. If you put your imagination into casting and allowing yourself to put people in ways that you ordinarily don't get to see them in, it's wonderful. That's all I can say. So I'd encourage more of that if you can, but in that very conscious, deeply thoughtful and aware way, not in a blind way.
And I think that also thinking about the term usually is colorblind, that
Right,
it's
but we
used
say
usually it's
color
colorblind as we don't see color. But the problem is that we as audience, we see color.
Yeah.
And in this, and again, I want to say how here we have discourses of race that are specific to this country, that are specific to this time, and it's not true that we can see it and we're not putting that into what we see. And the problem is that white is seen as neutral, male is seen as neutral. So we have historically white male characters playing a transgender woman, playing a gay man, playing an Asian person, whereas the others then have to kind of stick to your gender, to your ethnicity, to your race, or to what is seen as, you know, what you can play. So that is why also it's important to remember that these things that we see as innocent, they're not. Even if we inherit them, they were placed there with an intention and with, you know, to keep those upstate. So that's why it's important to that if we're gonna trouble it, not just for a token, not just to fill a number, but really say, well, how does that change the story? How does the reading of The Sound of Music with 7 children, was it? How many children was 4, 7? And then 1 is Asian. I think, whoops, something happened here. When Papa was up to war, right? Right? So how do we then make that a little bit more complex? And maybe I'm dirty, I don't know. But I go there. So, and again, maybe, like I said, maybe in other contexts, historical countries and everything, it works because those discourses are not working the same because there is not that same history. But this is our history, and we can't ignore it and expect our audiences and our artists who are part and impacted by it, create and have pain because of it and have been excluded because of it, not be outraged and not see that not everybody sees necessarily when that is on stage.
I see you have a, but I do want to recognize this.
Okay. I do think that diverse casting is so important because it gives young audiences something to look up to and see that in the future they can have these bigger spectrum of possibilities. I am new to being a Latina because I'm from Colombia. And when you are from a Latin country, you're just Colombian, you're just Peruvian. And once you move here, you become a Latina. And that was fun and exciting for me, but at the same time, it was really restrictful because I had all these possibilities of characters back at home, but I had big dreams here. And once I come here and I see that I can only put myself there for Latin roles. And for example, then I go in, I don't look like Latina.
You're not a Latina enough.
So I feel like the stigmas and the stereotypes have to be fought, and putting different faces in traditionally white cast roles will just be so inspiring for young audiences.
I just think I think that it always comes back to the people, and it always comes back to the heart. Like what you brought into the room with the reading is that what we keep finding while we all gather here today is that there was a lot of heart, a lot of, and we always think that it's an intellectual thing or it's something that if we can just explain very, very well, people will get. But really what we're dealing with is heart stuff and feeling stuff and it hurt me stuff, as opposed to not just I didn't understand it. And so I think that what that also translates to is when you cast people, you're thinking about who they are and what they bring and what they're going to put. I get in trouble for saying this all the time. I played a Negro servant in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Everyone's always like, how could you dare play that role, Negro servant, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof? I called my daddy. I said, Daddy, the Guthrie want me to play a Negro servant and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. I don't know what to do. My daddy said, you take that job, son. They love you there. I said, really? He said, yes, I've been there. And I will explain to you, I was in that direction, and outside, in that room, I can tell you that I have felt more heard in that room from my director at that point in time than I felt by a lot of people. And that's because she cast a person. She cast a person to fulfill something. Now listen, would I do it again? Probably not, but I always like to try things. I always like to try them. And I know, but she cast a human, a person. So when we showed up, we said, wait, we can't do that. We need to do this. And she was like, okay, sorry. We're like, good, you good? All right, cool. Let's go back. Let's make that happen. And I think that people thing is what we just keep running over in these conversations, that it's about, I think you can provide all the context, which is, I think at the end of the day, the other thing I say is that, like, you're right. I lead a lot of post-show discussions, and people always love to come and tell me, I don't, because I'm always normally, it's about people of color, and they go, I didn't even see that. I didn't see color. And I want you to know that, because no matter how much we push, very often there is an audience that exists that does not see it. And we can't, we can explore, but we can't. I think you have to be so grounded in your organization and your show and your reasons why and all of that, which we see at 10,000 Things. But if you can be so grounded in that when you do it, when you perform it, you know everything that you're doing, you know how it feels. That audience is going to take it how they do. They're going to take it how they do. Now, what we then have is we've got a group of artists, though, who also, because the artists, we come to the show, we always come and we ready. We got our engines. You know, like, that's always going to be true. But that other audience, that's the delicate part, because in the culture, I always call it in the culture. Normally, black people say, my grandma say, but I just call it in the culture. In the culture, it say the soup don't taste the same in everybody's mouth. And at the end of the day, I can point out so many people who would absolutely love to be the Negro serving a cat on a hot tin roof, who see no problem with it, and who wouldn't have the struggle that I would have. I can point, of all the people who disliked the West Side Story, we know that there are people of that area who loved it. And I think that that's the more delicate thing that we've got to negotiate. These large institutions have a responsibility to ground it. But I think what we're really arguing with is just like how we as people are going to be people and then put on art about people where people come and watch it. And what's the heart? Where's that at? But it don't work when you don't ground it. And that's what you're sensing there from that program, I feel.
I just want to recognize that hand and we'll come right here.
So talking about impact, I guess on a really concrete level, I would like to go back to the workshops because I participated in one of them. And I'm not Latina, so, I didn't go thinking like, oh, I'm going to be cast in West Side Story, right? But it was framed to me as a free dance class. So I went, and it seemed like that was what everybody there was kind of expecting. And then we got there, and then they were like, oh, fill out this audition form. And we were kind of like, oh, okay. And then, we went in the room, and we warmed up, and went through some dance combinations, and folks were like sitting behind a table, taking notes, and then a lot of the other people who were in the workshop, I either know or, it's a small enough community that you see each other around a lot, and we kind of checked in on that, and just about everybody who was in that workshop with me that I talked to about it agreed that it was kind of a weird experience in that we all felt like we were coming in for a class, and then like, oh no, oh shit, did I just audition for the organ? And so I only bring that up in terms of impact and process because, again, like I said, I'm not Latina, I'm Ojibwe. I wasn't thinking like, oh man, like I'm gonna get cast in West Side Story. But at the same time, I think in terms of like thinking about engaging with artists of color and communities of color, and like how to really serve us, I think that to me, I guess my experience and what I heard from a lot of other people who were in that experience was that it didn't feel transparent and it didn't feel like it was serving us.
Okay, thank you. You go right here.
She talked to a point of what I wanted to bring up. I'm gonna stand, sorry. My name is Adi Carreras, and I have been in Minnesota for 30 years. I have been an actor, sort of, kind of, for 15. I've always wanted to do West Side Story because I like all the dancing. But I can't sing worth shit. I can carry a tune after I will know. And I think that I can act, okay? The heart. My heart was hurt because I was told that I needed more training, which I never really had, but I have a lot of experience. I needed training to be on that stage. Okay, I don't know how to sing, but maybe I can train. But then, not knowing what that training was gonna be, the transparency behind that training, was it gonna be to be on the stage, or was it just for me to develop as an actor? Was it a place for me to go and show what I have and maybe get on the stage? I didn't know. I didn't audition and I didn't go through any of it because I have a day job that I could not leave. Otherwise, I would have auditioned. Screw it, I was gonna go up there and make a fool of myself, but I was gonna do it. But in reading that article, okay, and in experiencing the different ways that artists need to be trained, what we need for training, what I personally need for training, that has not been offered to me, okay? And hearing that we needed to be trained to be on the stage, that we're not good enough, because that's what I heard from reading that article. That's what I heard from reading that article, that I am not good enough. That hurts. I might not be the best actor, pero coño, I act. And you telling me that I'm not good enough
Well, ALMA, so like, that's a thing. That's a thing. My name is Christina Castro. I'm a Latina artist who's been in the Twin Cities for 10 years. I was issued no invitations to any of these things, and I would just like to say, I have a huge heart here in the Twin Cities, and if we're still having these conversations, once I've been in the Twin Cities for 25, 30 years, I'm gonna make a real big stink about it. Just because I've been trained, and I'm here, and I've been working on beautiful stages in the Twin Cities, and I love living here. And then the article came out. And then it was like, it erased the 10 years I've been here, the 6 since I graduated from the Guthrie BFA program. Like, none of it mattered. Because the Joe Schmo out in Rosedale who read that article is gonna assume that any Latina or Latino actor that they see isn't good enough to be on the Ordway stage. Because to Joe Schmo, the Ordway stage is what they go to or what they think of when they, you know, those memes that are like, my mom thinks I'm Selma Hayek, and, my acting teacher thinks I'm, and I just think I have a day job. But the thing is, that's what, it matters. It matters when you stay here and you try to, and then an article gets published like that, and then it's like I don't exist, and all the beautiful work that I've done and gotten to do isn't good enough to be Maria. I want to be more than Maria. I'm writing plays so that I don't have to be Maria. So that is the impact. So ALMA has a website. We're all going to be on it, and I suggest you take a look when you're looking, because we are here, and we will make sure you know from now on.
My name is Pedro. I'm an actor here, 10 years. I would like more specifics and clarification on your end, because I would like to believe I'm confused about what I'm hearing. It sounds to me, and hearing everyone else's comments as well, that there were things that were essential to you about this production. It was essential to celebrate this work by these men at this time for the reverence and the skill involved in the production. And I'm hearing then in the way that the outreach, the workshops, the way that we were addressing the article, the way we're being addressed now, it sounds like it was essential to celebrate their accomplishments, but it is not essential to include us in our own story. Because it cannot be escaped that these men are using our story to make their work. So I'm hearing that, and I'd like some clarification. Is that what's going on? Are we being told that we are not essential in the telling of our own stories?
I'd open it up to James Rocco and Jamie, or whoever wants to chime in.
Well, yeah. I think you're absolutely essential in telling these stories. And that's part of the reason that we're planning to do both of these shows. We think they're important stories to tell.
I agree. So you're mentioning that you want to do West Side Story and In the Heights as bookends. Bookends to what?
I think they tell important stories that haven't been told often enough in the Twin Cities. And I think they are both important theater works. When I first saw In the Heights, I had never seen work like that in my life, ever. And it sort of, I think it changed things in musicals. I think the musical theater, new work is different because of what In the Heights did. I think if you go back and look at the history of it, West Side Story made a lot of those changes too. So I understand why the article is offensive, and I'm sorry. It was, the headline in particular is inconsiderate in the extreme. And, but I'm here tonight to listen. and not just to listen, but to try to hear what you're saying. There were choices about being here tonight, and I choose to be here. I want to be in the Twin Cities for a long time. And part of the reason I came to the Ordway was because of this incredible local artist community. There are 6 cities in North America you can live in if you're in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Toronto, Vancouver, and the Twin Cities. And I'm proud to be here. And I'm really proud of the work that we do when we produce. Don't get me wrong, I'm proud of when we present, but I'm really proud when we produce. And that's part of the reason I came.
So I recognize this hand there.
Hi.
Hi.
You know, this
Are you going to tell everybody that you're a pole dancer?
I wish I could say I'm a pole dancer. How's that? My question is one that is always asked, and like it's a measure of something, and maybe it is, and maybe it isn't, but just out of curiosity, in positions of decision making at the Ordway, are there Latinos?
Yes.
Yes. And what positions are they in?
Oh, you mean what positions in our company are
Yes.
Latinos?
Yes.
Our artistic director of World Music and Dance, Movement and Music, Dana Martinez. Sorry?
You have somebody in the education department, I understand.
There are a number of people in our employ that are, and again, to go out and reach out into the community, we have a number of community advisory groups that participate in all of the decisions that we make.
And the reason I ask the question is because in my line of work, I am asked and privileged to sit at a variety of different tables with a lot of folks, and sometimes the discussions become difficult. And it would be easier for me to be quiet and not really bring up touchy subjects. But I don't know what the climate is at the Ordway, and if there are opportunities for Latinos that are in positions of decision making there to be encouraged, allowed, developed the environment so that they know that they have the ability to voice and speak to some of the issues that are out in community that may not reach into Ordway. Excuse me. And I think the slip I just made has been made again tonight by someone else, and I think that's very telling, that there is a perception of certain theater companies that those voices are not unleashed, that the opportunity to hear those voices are not encouraged. And I think that there is something there for you folks to look.
May I just respond quickly, if that's all right?
Sure.
So, we have a diversity, equity, inclusion steering committee on the staff level, not on the board level. We have one on the board level, but we have one on the staff level. So this is a part of conversation in everything we do. And it's hard. It's mucky. We make mistakes. We say the wrong words. The staff people that are here will bug me about colorblind tomorrow. But we say the wrong words and we make mistakes and we don't always get it right and we don't always agree. It's part of the conversation. But it's an important part of what we're doing. We've put a huge focus on the board. By 2018, the board of the Ordway will reflect demographically the city of St. Paul. And the reason we picked St. Paul was because it's the most diverse community amongst the areas. And community involvement, again, from my point of view, is really important. That's how we help make decisions. James mentioned that he's leaving at the end of the year. It's not in a few months. And we will be inviting the artistic community to come together and talk about what skills we're looking for in our next person to lead our theatricals. It's not a gimmick. That's a way to get input and feedback and hopefully make the right choice for the person that should succeed you. All of these things are important.
And I think that the last thing I want to say to this little discussion we're having here between you and I is that if the people that you have in positions that you are trying to gain input from aren't what we call in Spanish peleoneros, which are people that will fight for their voice to be heard, for equity, then keep looking.
I see a lot of hands up right now, and I just want to recognize I see your hand. But I do want to ask this question because we are sort of, getting to the latter portion of the evening. And I just asked this question because I think, we're sort of driving to this in different ways. Of what is a successful collaboration between institutions? And then I think also Adam brings up a really great point of, as we talk about institutions, we're ultimately talking about people, right? A group of people, yeah? So in that respect, I mean, would either Teatro or the Ordway feel like this was a successful collaboration? Well, yeah.
People before me, so.
No, to respond to that question.
I'm Alberto Luciano, I'm the artistic director at Teatro. Most of you know me by Al, right? When we started this collaboration, I got a call to about a year ago, getting ready for a conference. So it was stated to me that the Order was interested in doing West Side Story at that time. So I said, and they asked me to get involved. So what I said is, don't sign any contract yet for that. Let me go to my conference, and when I come back, I'll talk to you. One of the reasons that they approached me, not only because I was part of Teatro del Pueblo, is because I was one of the protesters when they did the West Side Story many years ago. Kevin McCollum was the president. And at the time, what the conversation was, we want to be involved in this process. And we were told that, no, you can go protest as much as you can. We're going to make this because it makes us money. And the bottom line was that. So that was, and I appreciate his candor, to tell you the truth. It was really direct, and that was it. So when I came back, I had a meeting with the 4 main protesters that had protested that show. I sat with them and said, look, this is the possibilities. They asked me to help, so how do I go about that? So what I did is we met and we said we could, and I mentioned that I was interested if we were to collaborate with that piece, that I would be interested in asking for In the Heights at the same time, because it was important to me to see reflect both 2 pieces that were iconic. Because the reality is, even though we might disagree with West Side Story, it's an iconic piece that reflects something that another generation appreciates. Even though there was, there had been challenges to it, and when we protested that, we didn't like West Side Story. But we can't just think about our generation. We needed to think about the people who appreciated that thing. What was important was that if they did that we would only participate, or I would only participate, if they decided on In the Heights. So it was a 2-deal program. I felt that if you leverage things, it was very important for the Ordway to do this Jerome Robbins choreography. And I thought, wow, yeah, that's important to the Ordway, but for us, it's important in the Heights. So we agreed that we were going to work, and we agreed on a certain number of demands. The first one was that we needed to go to the Ordway, and one of us, and in this case was one of the people in the group, that they would meet with their HR person and look at their process for the process of hiring.
if they had some systematic system and if there would be progress over time. So one of the people in the group went did that. The other thing was that we would be, and this is more for in our case, that we would be involved in the artistic aspect of it, and there were different outcomes that we wanted. One was the representation of Latinos on stage. That was very important. And the second was that any funding that would go with the Apple's name, a percentage, and we agree on, we were negotiating on which percentage was, to lift the Apple because our name was used. Fourth was community events that put the shows into context of what West Side Story was and is now. And we did a series, we planned a series of periphery events. Some were during the summer in the Puerto Rican party that they have every year, and other community events that we planned on. We talked about, we had conversations about equitable collaborations throughout the process. There is a big difference between the Ordway and Teatro. It is one of those things that you have to balance and understanding that we all have bottom lines. Partly is that as organizations college, sometimes we don't know what's important to us. It takes time and effort to understand what are the ultimate goals that are beneficial to the organizations. The same with the Ordway. They have certain bottom lines, interests that as long as I know those interests and they know our interests, that was something that was able to have us move forward. So in the process, yes, there's been pushback on certain things. First of all, Teatro del Pueblo has its own program. It's not the same one that the Ordway has. The Ordway has had some programming now, way a long time ago. Ours was developed through conversation with artists throughout a 1.5-year process. Includes different workshops. But yes, they asked me for some help. And yeah, I had some suggestions. One of the suggestions was that some of these workshops should be done at night. And we had conversations of why. The space that they have is very difficult to get at night. So I just suggested that. It took a little while, but that did happen. So it's been a process. The article, I don't know if you guys all read my answer to the article. We set it up in Facebook, contesting what was said in the article, because yeah, it was very insulting, in many areas, and I would report it as saying something that I did not say. But regardless of that, ultimately is what the article did. The article actually moved people into talking about it. Relationship with the Ordway is brought up because this article, regardless of who wrote the narrative, remember, there's no control who writes those narratives. I mean, I can show you what I told them because I wrote it and typed it to them, and it's very different than what we saw in the article. But regardless of what was powerful was that there was a reaction to that article. And what we need to do is look at ways that article allows for us to move the conversation further and to look at institutions and make them more amiable to bringing in artists of color. One of the things that I've been able to do through this collaboration and deciding equity, I've been able to address the donors at the Ordway. I mean, I didn't think I was going to be able to do that, but I was able to. And as part of that, I told them, mostly white people, that one of the things that would happen in the future is that many of them would actually be people of color, and that they should be speaking up so that the stages at the Ordway become more diverse and that they're more, not represent community, all the community, because that, I do not profess to do that, and I think nobody really is. And that's a really, I mean, that's my opinion, as well represent all the actors, or artists in the area, or nationwide. That's one of the things that I always state that because we don't do that. We don't represent any artists. Our goals is to leverage opportunities for artists, and that's been very important for us. And my relationship with the Ordway has been because I believe in, engagement. Not everybody's in agreement with me. I've had this conversation with other theaters. Some theaters say go out, other theaters don't. But I believe in that, and that's why I do what I do. So I'm committed to that because only if I engage the Ordway, if things change there. Not that it's a big boat. I've had many conversations. In a big boat, many people, and it's very difficult. Actually today we had a conversation with James. We had a conversation because they're doing some of the callbacks now. We talked about what diverse casting is, and when also the fact that sometimes you need to do culturally specific casting, that race does matter. And we had this conversation. If I wouldn't have been at the table having this conversation with James, having the access to him, because we didn't know each other before this. This is a relationship that has gone. At times, I get pushed back, and I know I push him and he pushes me. We're different people, right? We have different understanding and visions, right? So, important thing to understand that this is a start of a conversation, a deeper conversation. Not me only, it's a deeper conversation with other people because it's important to be inclusive and understand that there are different ideas. So, going back, we can talk about this article and what I agree or disagree with it, but the ultimate thing is it got us here. And I think that's really important. Conversation, building relationships, and developing collaboratives is about trust. So I just wanted to let you know that that's my relationship with the Ordway, and that's why I continue to try to push. Not everything is going to be perfect. I understand that. Understanding the Broadway system has been a challenge for me. 2 weeks to get everything done, so you have to know everything. If you're a dancer, you have to be a dancer. So there are ways to do other things, restage things in a different way, right? To be more inclusive, there are different ways. But this is just a start. And maybe the Ordway is not the place for this to do experiment that, or maybe it is. That's a question that we're all gonna have to answer. But I wanted to make sure that you understood what my relationship with the Ordway and what my intent was.
Yeah.
That some of it did not go as planned, or communication is a problem. It is, and there's pushback and pushing. But if you don't get skin into the play, you're never gonna change things. And I believe in change. So I just wanted to make sure you guys know.
Thank you. And really quickly, we talked about seats at the table, having voices, being able to advocate. But then, then you bring up the point of the article or whatever happening leading to this, which, potentially could be good, maybe not, I don't know. But the notion of elevating other people's consciousness through someone else's trauma, which, they're already living through, problematic. Yeah. So, ultimately, I think what we're pushing towards is so if there's future collaboration, and I know that I'm just, recognizing that we're almost up time, but that we've not had a chance to hear from Raul.
So much having been said. A couple of things that have been said, and I don't know about clarification, but it kind of ended in an ellipse. Is the explaining of who were these Latinos that were cast in the group. A lot of people here are in the Latinx artistic community. I know a lot of Latino actors, Latinx actors here in town, a lot of dancers. I recognize nobody in the cast list. Now, I don't know everybody. So when you tell me that a majority were in there, I don't know who they are. If you know, you can tell me, then I'd like to include them in our audition process, so that we can give them an opportunity here, because I don't know who they are. So that. The other one is that I have no ill feelings toward the Ordway, because when I first came here, Al, Shelly, Silvia, Pedro, a lot of us here, the Ordway opened their doors to us for Teatro del Pueblo in the mid-90s. We were given the McKnight every Christmas. We did a fully cast show, Latinos, musicians, community. We did a show called La Posada for I think 5 or 6 years at the McKnight.
Yeah, 6 years.
They basically gave us the keys and said, go do your show. We brought in Latino audiences. We cast all local Latino actors and musicians. We had a full mariachi on stage. It was incredible.
Can we bring that back?
Now what I'm saying is that back then, the image of the Ordway within the Latino community in town was up here. Right now, trying to hear justification for things that hurt feelings, for things that I'm not buying every explanation. Sorry guys, I'm just not. It's two different places. You know, and anybody can justify anything at any time. We're in the era of spin. Anybody can say anything and walk away thinking that I sold it. I'd like for it to be more inclusive. I'd like for our voices, our audiences, everybody to have an equal shot. I studied, old enough for you guys, Luis Valdez, Teatro Chicano up in California. He says some of his teachings are on some Maya teachings, and it's called In Lakesh, which means, it says, you are my other me. If I help you, I'm helping me. If you're helping the Latino community, you're actually helping your own community, your own organization. So to really talk about heart. If we really mean it, I'm helping you to help me, everybody's winning. Everybody's winning. There, did I say enough?
Well, I mean, just sort of in closing, I guess I would ask in terms of moving forward to further collaborations, authentic engagement, and again, both to Jamie and James, what has the Ordway learned? What have you heard from this evening in terms of authentically engaging community, and what can you put into practice?
But can I add something to that, Kurt?
Yeah, go ahead.
What have we all learned? What have we all learned?
Yeah.
Because, like I said, it's not against the Ordway. We all have guilt, and we all can help. It's on us. We need to be engaged. We need to do it, and we have kids. We need to talk to your kid without getting angry, or to your parent you need to talk without getting angry. Like I said, ahorita primero pierde. Sure. Somebody translate that. Whoever gets mad first loses.
Sorry, I see a hand right here.
One of the things that I wanted to get out of this gathering too is the issue of transparency, is the issue of the confusion of what it was and what it wasn't. Was it an audition? Was it a workshop? Was it helping us to get on this? What was it? I want to know.
It is still going on. What actually started, it started way before this project started. A couple of actors came to me and said, we don't have any place to regularly do dance class, but we come in on Mondays. We started doing that, and really what happened was, all of a sudden, you realize, oh, actually, you're really good at hip hop. You teach next week. We'll all learn hip hop. It's sort of been, so it's been all different kinds of classes, and there was one today. There were two today, actually. And it was mostly became like a cooperative. We put ads in Minnesota playlists to let people know, because just like you don't know people, I don't know people too. So I'm trying to figure out, what do I do? Knock on people's door, go to the freezer section of the grocery store? How do I let people know we're doing this? So we put it on Minnesota playlist, mostly to open the door, and there was a limited number of spaces. I learned something great from you, because I don't even know what day you're talking. I'm thinking about it, because we did do a day articulate well enough that I'm not sure, but maybe the day you were there was the audition after the workshop and there was a miscommunication about workshop and audition. I don't know. And I'm glad that I know that now because I'm going to certainly think about how to not have that ever happen.
Yeah. And just to be fair, I think the response was wanting transparency, maybe not clarification. So yes, needing transparency within the process of yes.
Yeah, I just want to circle back to another point that was made earlier, by Pedro, I think, about bookends, and that this should be more than just West Side Story and the Heist, and that's it. And we never featured Latinx actors again at the Broadway because it's kind of the issue that I'm thinking about right now in terms of like something that just happened this weekend with Wonder Woman. Like everyone's saying Wonder Woman, you know, beat sexism in the box office, but if we don't keep having female directors and female actresses and action leads like this, it's not going to mean anything. 'Cause it's going to be like one thing, spectacular, it's done. You can't just be like one thing, okay, we're done. We fought sexism, we fought racism, we're done. It has to be an ongoing goal and becoming part of season planning and constantly having conversations with this and to keep working through all that.
I know you had your hand up so long ago.
Oh, earlier I did in response to another conversation, but I'll just say, my name is Karen Martinez. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the Guthrie Theater. And I've worked in this city at a culturally specific theater. I did my PhD at the U. This keeps happening. I'm from Austin, Texas. I worked in contemporary festivals with theaters there. And I think one thing we're all getting to always is driving towards the context of truth. And that there are different kinds of contexts in different places despite the label that hangs over a theater. I can tell you from my personal experience as a fighter, as a Broomha witch, that I am as comfortable speaking my truth and creating shenanigans, if you will, trouble, saying what I want at the Guthrie Theater as I have been in any place in the Twin Cities, including culturally specific theater. I am more fully myself in all of that complexity there as I am anywhere. And it's not, I feel bad at this moment offering this because such beautiful things have been said at the end of this, and I was going to keep my mouth shut and you call on me, but I feel I need to say that because that's my context. And for us to always drive towards complexity and context in these conversations.
Thank you. Can I ask just a follow-up question for you? What are the conditions that you are there that exist that make you feel like you can be realized, that your voice can be realized?
I work with a lot of Black folks. I work with Native American. I work with queer folks. What I bring to the lens to that place in terms of my childhood in East Texas and nerding out at the U, that I can be complex. That yes, I'm a Latina, or really what you would say in Texas is I'm Mexican. And no one would correct me for that, where I've been corrected in Minnesota. That I can be complex. That I don't have to just be one aspect of my identity. And I think that's all any of us can hold for.
Thank you. Yeah. Any other responses, comments?
My name is Marcela Lorca. I've been in Minnesota forever and I've worked at the Guthrie for over 25 years. And as a movement coach and choreographer and then director, and I'm a proud trainer of many young actors that are here today. I have a lot of thoughts in my head, but the things that are sticking with me right now not allowed. And I think that now, hopefully, we're turning the corner and we're coming into another area where theater, as you mentioned before, can be a source of joy and can be a source of joy through that imaginative act, and where we can all partake and we can all see ourselves and be ourselves and create worlds where when we're thoughtful and when we're good at communicating and when the rules of engagement, as you mentioned, Adam, before too, when you have a director that really respects you and sees you, create the right condition where all kinds of projects can be brought to life in tremendously interesting ways. So that's what I'm hoping for. And we've gone from this feeling of, there was a majority and I count, I'm a woman of color, because that's the label I've been given in this country, where, I would see forever the litany of white male directors, and for me to crack one opportunity open, it was years of sweat and labor and going through it very stubbornly until I got it. But it's been hard. And now it feels like things are changing and things are moving into this sort of universe of diversity and equity and inclusion. And those are great initiatives, but I also agree with you, they're new, they're young, and they're clunky, and they're not fully formulated, and we're all sort of doing this uncomfortable dance together and finding the right terminology and finding the right way of communicating with each other. But I just want to remind everybody that it's a privilege to be in an art form that is about imagination, that it is about joy, and that it is about bringing teams together, ultimately. And the last production of West Side Story I saw was in Berlin with all German people, and it kind of made sense. It was a story it read to me, and Jerome Robbins was not the choreographer, it was a different choreographer, and it was all kind of in black and white. Everybody was really silly. The characters were really, really kind of not very smart, except for the leads, and the leads played this beautiful tragedy. So that's kind of what I have in my mind right now.
I just want to give you space to speak if you want.
Yeah, I just have to say, now that we're wrapping up here pretty soon, thank you for doing the uncomfortable dance with us, with ALMA, with the audience, with the artists who are here that is part of the community. This is uncomfortable, and I'm so happy that we're able to push that and have the uncomfortable dance, how Marcela was saying, and that we continue having this conversation in small groups and in larger groups, and that it does not just stay here in this room, that we go out and we go see shows that don't include us and then spark the conversation, why not? Why? We are all really, this is a small community, and we know each other because we've connected with one another, and we're still learning from one another, right? And so thank you for allowing this to happen tonight, because it means a lot to me as an artist, to us as the organization, as it's formulating, but also just as a welcome to this new community that is breaking the walls down and starting brand new, because the systems need to be broken to restart a whole new one. So thank you very much. That's all I need to know before I start
Yeah, I guess I'd open it up to the entire panel if there's any closing statements or remarks or observations or questions. Yeah. Good. Yeah.
I'm just going to say, because I do a lot of working with young people, I just think that how we train and how we think about training young artists becomes incredibly important. And all of us as artists, as we talk to people, that we understand that everybody is experiencing the world that we live in right now, the context of the world that we live in right now. And then sometimes they choose to study theater, and sometimes they choose to be in plays. And I just think it's critically important that we think about that we think about how we train and who we train. And that a lot of this, I also hear, is about access. Like I went to a program where at one point in time I was one of 3, and that is a drastic change. The current program is very different from what that was. But then now we got to think about what that means. And so I just think that but if we walk that back, my people weren't supposed to do the Shakespeare, So I think that historical imbalance is also what we're struggling with right now as we think about this training. And so I think just how we pass this on, how we pass on this uncomfortable stuff just is really important to me.
I just want to say, as a whole, although it's really hard, community engagement is very important for every organization, because I just feel for organizations to be successful, we really have to find out who our community is and who our audiences are.
Yeah, great. And I think I think you articulated what that is this uncomfortable dance. If you want to engage community, you need to start engaging consistently with these uncomfortable conversations and continue to learn and engage out of it. Yeah.
And I guess I just want to add that we still have a lot of questions that need to be, further explored. Like, who is in the room? Because it's not only the actors, it's directors, it's playwrights, it's choreographers. So the artist, and then who is coming to see the play, and what are we really doing to have them come, or do we need to go to them also? Because I think very often it's thought too that Latinos don't go to the theater, but it's not true, but also it's difficult sometimes to get to the theater, to find a babysitter, to have transportation, to pay for those tickets, and to get to a theater that when I look around, I'm one of the 5 people of color in hundreds. And then suddenly we become, or we feel, as we are also performing and being there. So let's continue this great conversation. Thank you for inviting me and for inviting us to be part of it, and we need more of this.
Great. All right, well, I think that concludes the evening. Thank you so much for being here.